Inspecting your crawl space can seem very intimidating if you've never been in your crawl space. Luckily here at AccuLevel, we've had years of experience in examining and inspecting many crawl spaces. In this video, we'll discuss what to look for when you're inspecting your crawl space. Hi, I'm Nolan and I'm the sales director here at AccuLevel. Inspecting your crawl space is very important, but even more important is knowing what to look for. So today we'll talk about what to look for while you're inspecting your crawl space. So while you're inspecting your crawl space, one of the first things you can look at is that access door. They typically go ahead and latch at the top and they fit tightly to the block or the poured foundation around your structure. So if that door is a little bit older, it's starting to rust, maybe it's even missing the bottom half, that's one thing you want to look at. It can kind of be the first sign of maybe there's something to be concerned about, because then insects and rodents and water can start coming into your crawl space. Now, once you're in the crawl space, hopefully you've got plenty of room. You've taken a flashlight down there so that you can see what's going on. And as you're taking a quick scan, it can seem very overwhelming. Maybe you have some insulation hanging down in that crawl space. Maybe you have a vapor barrier down on the floor, but maybe it's crunched up in some areas, things like that. So what we're going to do is kind of break it down in some of the most important things that as you're crawling around you can look for. Number one, inspect those foundation walls. Make sure that there's no cracks in those foundation walls. Indicating inward movement or bowing of those crawl space walls, as well as any cracks that are going more vertical, could be signs of foundation settlement. So as you're walking around or crawling around, you could take a look at those foundation walls and make sure they're staying nice and sturdy, and you don't see signs of water intrusion on those walls or sinking or bowed walls as well. And then as we take our eyes up a little bit, what you'll see is three components of that sit on top of that foundation wall. Number one being the sill plate. Now this is where your 2x10, 2x12, 2x6 floor joist is going to land. So it's a small 2x4 that sits right on top of that foundation wall. If you have a screwdriver or you've taken a knife down with you, go ahead and just stab that wood a little bit to check and make sure that that wood's not beginning to rot. You'll also see discoloration in that. If it is starting to rot, it'll get darker, but just because it's dark doesn't mean that it's rotted. In addition to that, what you'll see is, like I said, is those floor joists sitting straight on top of those sill plate. Check the tips of those floor joists, right where they sit on the sill plate, right where they meet up with the back piece of wood that we call the rim joist or the band board. Again, you can stab those with a screwdriver or a pocket knife. Be sure that that wood is staying nice and sturdy. It's not soft and it's holding together well. These two components, when they do rot out, they will show settling symptoms in your living room, in your kitchen, in the floor above that crawl space. Third thing in that piece is looking at that rim joist or that band board. Again, we're just simply stabbing it, making sure that it's good and steady. That band board or that rim joist is there to protect your crawl space from the outside elements. So again, whether that's rodents, bugs, or water intrusion, just make sure that's staying nice and sturdy. Now we're going to kind of move our attention towards more of the center of the crawl space. So what we're typically going to have is at least 1 to 2 main beams running down the center of your crawl space. And these beams are going to be the support for those overlapping floor joists. Just typically your floor joists are not going to be able to run 20 to 30 feet the whole width of your home. Those are typically running anywhere from 10 to 15 feet and then landing on that main beam. So that's a very critical point load. So what we're doing is we're looking at that main beam, number one. We're looking for cracks in the wood, splintering, or you may even be able to sight down the end of it and see any kind of bowing or buckling between your support columns. If you're seeing this, this is signs that either they're overspanned between columns or that you've had some moisture in that crawl space and that wood's beginning to get a little bit soft and starting to move. So typically, if you're just starting to see it belly in between those supports, is all we're looking at is maybe adding some supports between the existing. The other thing that we're going to look at is the shims. So typically you have a block column or a poured column, sometimes even steel, but then right there at the top of that column between where the main beam sits and that column is you'll typically have some sort of wood shims. This can vary from 2x4 stacked up on each other to just more small, like almost painting shims that are stuffed in there. those typically rot out when there is a presence of moisture. And we know crawl spaces have dirt floors, so there's always going to be some sort of moisture in there. If those shims are starting to squish, maybe we look at pulling those out and getting maybe some more longer lasting shims in there, such as steel shims. Now you've kind of done a general inspection of the wood of the underlying structure portion of this. The other thing that we're going to really want to watch while we're looking at that underneath is mold. We're going to look at mildew. What you're going to see is some brown stainings, maybe even some white stainings at the beginning of stages, and that's typically going to be right there on the bottom of those floor joists. It's very easy to see. You also may have some fiberglass insulation stuffed up between those floor joists. You want to pull that down a little bit. Take a look underneath there, because that fiberglass can really harbor moisture up against your subfloor and start to cause some of that rust or that rot and that mildew and that mold. So you might want to pull that down, check that a little bit, make sure that you're not seeing that discoloration. You should be able to just simply shove it back up in there and it'll hold there. Then the last thing we're going to look at is what's covering our crawl space floor. So there's a few different things that you'll see here. Number one, if you have an older home, that vapor barrier or just that 6 mil plastic over the years might have just broke down and there's just little pieces of plastic laying everywhere. The other thing you'll see is just a real nice vapor barrier that stretches the full floor. That is great to see, and you can take comfort in seeing that. And the other thing is just no signs of plastic anywhere. Now, there's two things you want to check here. Is number one, is it just dirt? If it's just dirt, there was probably never a vapor barrier put down, and this is something we need to look at getting taken care of. The last thing is if it's got pea gravel, it's possible that that vapor barrier is just below that pea gravel. So you can rake some of that pea gravel aside with your hands and see if you find that vapor barrier underneath. If you do, just make sure it's in contact. It's not falling apart or disintegrating. So those are some of the general things as you're inspecting your own crawl space that you want to look at. And again, taking some pictures, a notepad down there, and maybe even just doing, I know I'm terrible at drawing personally, but just doing a simple sketch and maybe indicating in your notes, hey, this is where I noticed something of this is where I saw that, and taking some pictures. So if there's nothing going on down there now, and it looks very clean, dry, and healthy, then you know that at this time, at this year, you looked at that and it was in good shape. And then next year when you want to jump down there, or in the next few months that you want to jump down there, you have something to reference and not just your memory or what you thought it was. So those are some of the very important pieces you can look at while you're inspecting your own crawl space. Thanks for watching. I hope this video helped give you a checklist on how and what to look for in your own crawl space. If you want to read more on this, go ahead and click on our blog link in the description below. And if you want to continue to learn more, go ahead and click the link at the end of this video to take yourself more through our crawl space repair course. And again, please subscribe for more.